So, welcome along to this Your Voice event. My name's Rihanna. For those who might have met me last month or those who haven't, I am the Early Careers Project Lead at the Centre for Leadership Performance. We're a leadership development company working with people of all ages, such as young people like yourselves. And a really key thing that we're passionate about is making sure that young people have a platform to have their voices heard in their community, which is why that we are delivering this Your Voice event for you this morning. This one, I'm not sure how much you've been told, but this one is on the local government reorganisation. So we have got a wonderful guest with us this morning, Councillor David Moore. So just a quick housekeeping. If you're obviously not talking, please keep yourselves on mute, just helps with the background noise. We will have a Q&A session towards the end. Do encourage you to either use the chat or take yourselves off mute and ask those questions. A really great opportunity to ask what's going on in the local community. So please make the most of this session. I think that's it. Just a quick one that we are also recording. So we'll use this for future. So it'll be sent to your team at Gen2, who will share it with learners who weren't able to join. And then I'll also be creating a few notes and report to send on so that all this learning and questions is captured. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful guest. So thank you, David, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that great introduction. So yeah, everybody, I'm Councillor David Moore. My current role is I'm the Deputy Conservative Leader on the new Cumberland Council. So we're going to talk today about LGR, but I think I'll tell you a little bit about myself because you people are just starting out on that journey in life, you know, with your apprenticeships, something that wasn't really available much when I come to the leaving school. As you can tell by my age, I've been around for quite a long time and I've been in politics quite a long time and local government, but I've also run a business alongside that. When I was 15, and not a career advice I'd ever give to any of my friends, colleagues, grandchildren or children, is I actually left school at 15. I was the last age group that was allowed to leave without taking exams. And the only way you could do that was if you had a job. And one of the strange things was I left school and then I got a letter from school saying to me, you haven't put down who your employer's going to be, and therefore you cannot leave. And I said, well, I'm going to become self-employed. I'm going to work for myself. I've got a family business and that's where I'm working. And at which point they told me that wasn't acceptable and being a self-employed person wasn't an employment. So it just shows how the world's moved on and the lack of entrepreneurial push there was in those days. But as it was, I walked down the road to see a colleague down the road and took a job for 18 months working in agricultural contracting until I was able to come back and work in the family business. That family business was farming and milk rounds and dairy business. I developed that and we expanded it over the years to a really successful business. But alongside that, I found that a little bit mundane and enjoyed the business side of it. But alongside that, I, at 18, decided I'd join the local fire station as an on-call firefighter. That's giving up some of your time to respond to fire calls within your local community areas. And I found that something that I really had an appetite for. And over the years, I ended up serving 42 years as a retained firefighter in my community alongside running the business. But that gave me a new set of skills. And it actually what took me into kind of leadership roles, because I eventually developed that and then I became the watch manager of the Seascale Fire Station, which is a retained station. We're dealing with about 90 fire calls a year. Really exciting stuff. Love sitting in the front seat of a fire engine going to fires. I know we shouldn't say that, but you know, really gives you a buzz. And running a business alongside it, it was a really nice balance. When I sold part of the business off later, I went to work on a 0 hours contract for Cumbria Fire Service, delivering fire safety advice. Alongside that, road awareness training. And one of my biggest gigs for road awareness training was working with the 16 to 25-year-olds, which were then the Sallerfield apprentices, which are probably the equivalent of where we are today with your organisation, but that was at Sallerfield, 100 apprentices each year, where we taught them about driving safely. You being the most vulnerable age group on the roads, that was a really important role. So I've actually enjoyed working alongside young people all my career, and we've done that. Also alongside that, which might sound how I fit the time in, I became a local councillor. I joined the Seascale Parish Council, which is the village I live in, because I'm passionate about my community. And I joined that some 38 years ago. And I'm still a member to this day because I still believe passionately in the role that we do. I then moved to Copeland Borough Council, and that's when I first got an introduction into politics. And local government is driven by politics, and although sometimes you think it would be better if everybody just was working on the same journey, politics is the way it operates, and that's the way it's done. I spent 12 years as leader of the opposition in Copeland Borough Council, and then it went through a process where it decided to have a directly elected mayor. Those were quite unique at the time, and Copeland was one of only 9 district councils in the whole country to have a directly elected mayor. I was delighted at the time that the directly elected mayor appointed me as his deputy and asked me to have a portfolio that included corporate services and the nuclear industry. Because the nuclear industry is something that my farm is less than half a mile from the Sallerfield complex. So I've lived next to the nuclear industry all my life, but actually I've never worked or been employed within it. And that's kind of quite unique, and why I was asked to take up a role of chairing stakeholder engagement for the nuclear industry and holding the industry task. And you might think, you know, that's quite a challenging task for somebody, but what I've done is made the industry try to make all its documents and what it's doing readable, so that the community and the people that I represent can understand what the industry is talking about, and it's not in the jargon that they do. So I spent a lot of years jargon busting. But one of the things we did realize that we actually lead the world now in nuclear engagement. And the model that we're operating here next to Sallerfield is now we have visitors from all over the world come to see how that open and transparent engagement works. And that engagement works from our engagement with some of the young apprentice groups that we work with, the young graduates, right through to all age groups. Everybody's involved in that, challenging the industry and holding it to account. And it's a model that's actually now recognised, as I say, internationally. And sometimes you have to pinch yourself. I was tasked to go to Japan to talk to Japanese businesses about stakeholder engagement. And when I was standing on the rostrum in the British Embassy in Tokyo with the cross flags behind you of the Union Jack and the Japanese flag, you pinch yourself and say, how did a farmer from West Cumbria arrive here? And it was something I felt really passionate about, because it really meant that you can achieve anything you want. You know, you take some small steps, but it's unbelievable what we can achieve by being here in West Cumbria. And there's some great achievements. But that's enough about me. I could talk all day about me because that's what I do. But actually, the job in hand is local government review. It's been around a long time, because as you're probably not aware, because people don't take a great interest, unless something goes wrong near you, you're not interested in who your local council is. It's only if the bin stops working or the roads and there's potholes that you actually think about the council. But in Cumberland and Cumbria, we had 3 tiers of local government, and have done since 1974, which was you have parish councils and town councils, what I call the lower level, and it's called the lowest tier of local government. Probably the bit I enjoy most, though. That's the bit that's really close to people. Then you had your district councils, which in the New Cumbria there was 3, but across the whole of Cumbria there was 6. And then you had a county council. So local district council, if you think about that, we dealt with emptying your refuse bins, street lights, planning, licensing, those types of issues. You then had the county council, which dealt with education, highways, adult services, all those big ticket items, health. So all those big ticket items, but they were all very difficult to navigate. Because once you become a councillor, people phone you up and you see you're the councillor. But actually, there were elements that I said is absolutely nothing to do. So on the cards for the last 20 years came along unitary councils, which actually said we should only have one council, which deals with all the services that's delivered. That allows us to have a better scale, so that if you look, for example, on refuse, in Copeland, we might have a refuse wagon goes down one side of the street and collects the refuse. Allerdale on the border goes up the other side of the street. Absolutely no sense in business terms of that being a good service. So it's been on the cards a while that unitary would come along. What was clear through unitary, the parish and town councils would not be they would not be touched. They will always remain, I think, as seen as that closeness to community. So that they're untouched through this. So around 12 years ago, it was mooted that there'd be a one unitary council for Cumbria. That would have been a whole Cumbria-wide one. That bid went forward to government but wasn't accepted. And although a lot of authorities became unitaries, we didn't here. There was a lot of push, and mainly from people like the elected mayor that I worked under, that believed that even though he was working himself out of a job, if you like, believed that the right thing to do was a unitary authority where one authority had control of all services. And that was a case we pushed and asked government if we could do that, and they asked us to submit cases. And those 4 business cases went to government, and the one we've currently got, which is the Cumbria, will be split into 2, which will be Cumberland and Westmoreland and Furness. So it's divided down the middle for ourselves here. We've got Copeland, Allerdale, Carlisle, and half of the county council have now moved into the new unitary council known as Cumberland. So I think if we stick to talking to that around how that works now, for a year we've been in what's known as a shadow authority, which just allowed the other councils to continue the work while we planned on what the new council would look like. That new council came into being on the 1st of April, and that's what's known as vesting day. And you may think we wanted to be big and transformational, but our planning for that day was to make sure that on day one, everybody knew who they worked for. Everybody had an email address and everybody had a pay number. So what we made sure was we could speak to everybody and we could pay them. So, you know, that actually passed over without a hitch, really. We've managed to do that. So now it's the start of the transformational work. And what the new council's got to do now is it's got to develop those services in a way that saves you, which will eventually become a tax. You'll be taxpayers, you'll be paying council tax at some point. And I've always seen the unfair thing with local government is that I've worked in a business environment all my life, and if I don't get a good service off somebody, I can go and buy it somewhere else. But unfortunately, as taxpayers in a local authority, you have nowhere else to buy that service. We deliver that service, and I believe it's the role of councillors to hold that service to account, to ensure that we provide a good service for everybody. I want you to get the service that I would expect, you know, so that's what the role of councillor is. Looking at the model of how a council works, it's a little bit like a large business. You've got a board which you'd look at, I would class the board as the councillors. So they set policy and direction, often driven by politics and ideology, but that's what's set. What I have behind that is a full workforce that's delivering all those services. So starting right from the top down, those services are delivered by the council employees, and they deliver those services across the piece. All that councillors do is set direction and hold that direction to account and trust. So we work really closely we've great working relationships with our workforce, but they don't work for the councillors. They work for the council, and the councillors are just there to set policy and ensure policy stays on track. So it's quite a strange operating method, and probably not the most efficient in business terms, but I think what we can do now, we can afford to be transformational. We can make savings. So when we went into the process of LGR councillors, so if we think people seem to think there was too many councillors, under the 4 councils that made up the Cumberland area, there were over 200. There are now 46 of us. So we're covering a lot of services and doing a lot of work, and we've yet to see whether we've been perhaps too lean, but one of the things we did when we consulted, people always said there was too many councillors. And it's quite strange because people actually think that we're kind of well paid, and councillors aren't. Councillors receive quite a small allowance to carry out their roles and responsibilities. So it's not an employed job, it's a job that just receives an allowance. So it's only for those that want to be really passionate about their community. But one thing I will say while I'm talking to yourselves is that what we desperately need is young people coming in, because I sit in meetings with people who are my age, and what we do need is that young challenge around those tables. So, I know it's not for everybody, but if the opportunity comes your way and it's something you're passionate about, we'd really love to see, young people getting involved. Your views are so important to us, and I must say it's one of the things I find quite hard to get. And I've got grandchildren of my own. I understand that I don't necessarily communicate via TikTok and text and things like that, so that engagement has got quite difficult. But I mean, it really is important, and I know you're sitting here, and I'm hoping that you're going to have lots of questions, because I was hoping to be on a panel of a few more, and I've ended up here all alone. And I would have much rather done this face-to-face. We're now using the technologies of Zoom, but I love to be in a room with people and talking to people. But this is what we've enabled. But I don't really want to rabbit on and on, which I can do, but I really want to know what people want to know. What's the questions? What have we achieved? What have I achieved? What are our goals? What would you like to see us deliver? What's missing in your area? What would you like to see? Because if we don't know, we can't deliver that. And there are opportunities with funding for us to drive it. One of the things in the new council we want to do, and it's clearly within our statements, is that we want to be compassionate, innovative, empowering, ambitious, and collaborative. So we want to work with everybody, and it's only when we know, because I get so many young people say, I wish we'd had this, and you go, please come and tell us, because if we don't, we can't deliver everything. But if we don't know, we can't push that forward. So I'm thinking I've probably filled my 20 minutes. I'm not sure, but I would like to.
Perfect.
I'd like to take some questions from the floor if there is.
There's one that's literally just come into the chat, so I'll read this out for you. So, how do young people get involved with their community and council activity?
So we're trying to reach out through youth groups at the moment. Anybody that's involved with youth groups, we're trying to reach out to those youth groups. But also, I mean, what I encouraged the local group to do down here some years ago, they kept pestering and saying, we need a new bike track. And what I said was, if 2 or 3 of you come together and come to our next parish council meeting, it's not a daunting place. It's just, half a dozen local people sitting round, and come and meet with us and have a chat with us. And from that, we ended up building a £50,000 BMX site. But it was because they took those early steps and just came and just attended the meeting. But I also will think that your local councillors, I don't know what sort of youth groups or, clubs, even sporting clubs, a local council will more than happily come in and talk to you. We want to engage young people, and we're looking for those opportunities. So whether it's a youth group, a sporting group you're involved with, your local councillors would come and happily talk you through what the process is to get involved.
Thank you, that's great. N2B have just submitted a question saying, what was it like being the Mayor's deputy?
Very hard work and challenging, because there are 2 types of mayors, and people tend to look at the mayor you often see on TV and things are the ones that wear the red robes and a chain, and they're what are known as civic mayors. So that's like a civic role. Where you've a directly elected mayor, the mayor is actually in charge of the whole council and runs the council. So yeah, it was a challenging role. My boss was very demanding, and actually would have been here today if something hadn't popped up, and he probably hasn't forgot I'm not now his deputy, and that's why I'm here today. So he still chased me up. But he gave me some challenging roles, which I'd been critical in council chamber by being the leader of the opposition, but he gave me the opportunity to see if I could do better and deliver on all the things I've been talking about. So I was pleased he gave me that opportunity. We did, working together collaboratively, have some good successes, and you know, we changed. Our view was that the council is a business. We both had the same ethos that the council is a business delivering services to a captive customer, and therefore we wanted to make that service the best it possibly could be at the lowest council tax we could charge. And during those 8 years, we never raised council tax above 2%. So business is the key to success.
Thank you. Starting to come in thicker now. So next question for you, David, is what are you doing at the minute to improve the community? That's from M2A.
Right. I don't know whoever these M2As are, but
I assume it's the classes.
Yeah. So what are we doing we're looking to encourage investment in our communities. So it's about opportunities that come along, and sometimes there are funding packages and grant packages that you can work with. As I said earlier, I do work with some of the young groups with it helps to have grandchildren and children that live in your own community that can actually give you a little bit of feedback sometimes. So we do regularly meet up with the groups, and we continue to deliver new football fields, new football kit, those types of things. It's the big transformational things we want to know what's missing. And I think listening is the only way that we get what we want. So we want to listen, we want to know what it is, but you never stop striving. I mean, as I say, I've been in Seascale Parish Council 38 years, and we're still looking at new projects that we can do. It never stops evolving at the things that we're looking to support. And we've recently supported the cricket club in expanding its youth group. So and I think that's happening in all our communities. All councillors are doing that, where they know that there needs to be an investment. We'll go and actively see if we can seek the money to do that.
Thank you, David. Next question. What's the biggest change you have managed to achieve with your career, and what are your goals for the future? There's two in there. I don't know if you want to separate them.
So if you look at the biggest achievement I probably made at Copeland, so it starts with a PFI building. So that's a public finance building. So when the council wanted a new building in Copeland many years ago, it actually borrowed money through a private company, and they're quite common. That's how hospitals are built now. And so you don't pay for the money for the building, you just literally pay a rent to live in it. And at the end of the day, you either can buy it out or be left with it. Copeland Centre was one of the earliest PFIs and cost the taxpayer around £1.2 million a year for that building. When we looked at that and what it was costing us, we decided to explore opportunities with the private company that owned it, and the government, whether we could get out of that lease. We negotiated really hard with the private company that owned it, but they weren't interested. So we told them we were going to go to the government and ask them to allow us to buy it out. They told us that's never happened, and they were quite confident we would have to continue paying the rent that we were paying, and that the government wouldn't back us. It was just around the time we'd had a newly elected MP. So spoke with our MP, and she managed to open the doors at government for those to allow myself and some officers to go down and present the case for that building. We'd already secured that Sellafield would lease part of that building if we were the owners of it. So we had a tenant that would come into that building. And lo and behold, the only PFI in this country that's ever been bought out and still exists today is that building at Copeland. So Copeland Centre now belongs to the new Cumberland Authority. Sadly, it's had to transition, but you know, we were the only council that's ever successfully bought out a PFI. We're allowed to use some of our PFI grant to buy it out. We now successfully have it tenanted, so Sellafield Limited that now tenanted. It was costing you 1.2 million a year. It now brings you in over £600,000 worth of revenue a year. I know that sounds very businessy, but you know, as opposed to 1.2 going out of the door, there's now 600,000 coming back into Copeland that can be spent on other things. So I'm still quite happy to say it's the only successful buyout there's been of a PFI building in the country.
Impressive. I might have missed this, but what does PFI stand for?
Private Financed Initiative.
Great.
It was invented by the Labour government many years ago when there was no money in government to build new hospitals and council buildings. So public buildings, there was no money for. So what the government did a deal with the private sector. So the private sector built these buildings, and what it does, so it used to allow Copeland to have a grant each year to assist us to pay the rent. So if you look at Carlisle Hospital, that's a PFI building. Ours was an extremely bad one because at the end of the 27 years, we wouldn't have owned it. We would have paid all that rent every year, and we would have had to walk away from the building or start another term of lease. So yeah, it was an initiative that's set up. It has allowed things to be built that the government didn't have money to build, and I think some of the more modern ones are better terms and conditions, but that was a very early one. It was particularly bad, but still stands uniquely as the only one ever been allowed to be bought out by a local authority. So, you know, it's very technical that, but it heartens me that I stopped 1.2 million leaving Copeland, and it's now revenue earning.
I think that's a great achievement, and you should be proud of that. We've got maybe a controversial question. So someone wants to know if the potholes around West Cumbria are going to be fixed as someone's gained a puncture and is not happy.
Right. I'll deal that in two parts. The answer is yes, eventually. But the question is, if you've got a puncture, if you've had a damaged tyre, then you can claim off the council. So two things that you need to do, and I'm going to tell you this then, and then we'll talk about the potholes. So if you damage a tyre in a pothole, go to the Cumberland website under highways and report the pothole. This is important. You must report the pothole. The map comes up and you can clearly see it's very quick to do, not very time consuming. If you've got any pictures, take them. And then you contact the council and they will then send out you a claims form. And you can reclaim the cost of that puncture. It depends whether it's a puncture. Most tyres end up damaged totally, so the cost can be quite high. But you must report it first, because the council will argue that it didn't know there was a pothole there if you make a claim before, but you can claim for that. The government has just put a lot of money forward to assist in pothole fixing, and I think in some ways it's something we really want to get on top of, because what we've done is patched. And when you patch and make good, it doesn't last. So what you need to do is do that proper investment. There is a Better Highways team out every day somewhere in Cumberland repairing potholes. Will we get on top of them? I don't know. I really don't know whether we'll, ever get really on top of them, but we are working really hard. We've got some extra money to do that. We've got a new machine in Lilyhall, which is one of the new state-of-the-art pothole filling machines. So, but out of the vein of everybody's life, absolutely. I live in a rural area, and but all I do is encourage people, and it's all web-based. You can go onto the website, you can just go into highways, report a fault, and it actually shows you a map of where you just pinpoint on the map, say large pothole. Once you've reported it, if you've got a damaged tyre, then you can make a claim on the council. I can't say that they'll always pay out on everything, but that opportunity is there. And I've just dealt, and how I know this, I've just dealt with somebody who burst a tyre travelling on a road and was quite angry, but we're still awaiting to see the outcome of the claim. But the pothole was filled within 2 days of her reporting it. So sometimes it's if we don't know, we can't fix it, and if we do know, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
But so I would encourage people to do that. If you see them, it's web based, it's quick to do. You don't need to speak to anybody. It's on a map, and if you've got an email address, they will actually contact you to tell you what's happened with that pothole. So get out there, get them reported, and we'll get to them eventually. Highways are probably, if there's a big flood of reports tomorrow, they'll be in trouble with highways.
They'll be coming for you.
Why were we inundated yesterday?
A really great question though, and
absolutely,
that person who submitted that.
And that's something that's real to everybody. So, and hopefully, if you can make a claim, you may get the cost of your tyre back.
Fingers crossed. Our next question we've got are, what are the plans to keep young people and talent in the area as Cumbria has an ageing workforce, and how are new people being attracted to the area?
I think when we look at what we've got in Cumberland, we've got some great opportunities. I mean, obviously there's different sets of, in the two paths. We've got the nuclear industry, if we're looking at Copeland and Allerdale areas, and the area that you probably cover. Carlisle's obviously closer to the M6 and has the Kingston Park there. But I think when we look, and you're at Gen2, when you look at the facilities there is at Lilyhall, they're actually second to none. For a rural local authority, the skills opportunities that appear here in West Cumbria, mainly driven by the nuclear industry, and I don't, that's the nuclear industry and its spin-offs. So some of the things we've invested a lot of money in Cleatamua to build an industrial solutions hub. Now, that industrial solutions hub is hopefully going to employ lots of young people in it, but it's about driving innovation. And that innovation we want to sell. We want to sell the skills that we have in this area across the world, but also bring the opportunities for people to work here, work abroad, but travel with it. We've already got Japanese companies expressing interest in some of the work we're doing here in West Cumbria. And I think, you're asking about how do we retain them here, but I think it's those international things that make the appetite. So you're not coming and you're not just going to work at one place all your life there. The opportunities within there are international opportunities. And what we want is probably people to develop their careers, maybe go out and go abroad and look at some of the other things that's going on, but then come back here because they want to come back here, and bring them skills on. People keep talking about we've got to keep creating jobs, but actually unemployment in Cumberland is quite low. So we are providing lots of opportunities. I think yourselves, you'll know through what you're doing there, in your apprenticeships, that the opportunities that you have here, I'm quite proud of, could match the skills that you'll get anywhere within this country. And it depends what your view is on life, but I think, why would I want to live anywhere else? I love this part of the country, and although there may be attractions to the bright lights and the cities, I think it's something you've got to do. But I think, there'll always be skills and opportunities here. We've got industries talking, the nuclear industry, even if you're in decommissioning and there's no new builds and no things like that, they've got 150 years worth of cleanup. They're a business that we know is going to be here. The government spends £3 billion a year of taxpayer money into West Cumbria. And then we've got the opportunities that's coming now that we're driving skills for, which is the new build, the SMRs, looking at hydrogen production. There's so many exciting skills coming along, and they need people from all skills. That we need the academics that can drive that forward, but what we're short of is engineers, people on the ground, welders. We need that broad range, and a lot of those craft skills that you're doing now are those skills that are desperately needed. So I think there's great opportunities for young people here, and I think if you go elsewhere and look around, you probably find that we have some real great opportunities here.
So it's not necessarily the case of creating new opportunities, it's showcasing much, getting a better, essentially it's the branding of Cumbria and Cumberland and how that comes across. And it's why events like this are important, to help them understand what's here.
And it's about, so we knew we had trouble attracting people to West Cumberland Hospital to work. And I mean, teaching hospitals are what attract. So what we've pioneered, working with UCLAN, is that opportunity that we're talking about, rural-based medicine. So we put the Centre of Excellence and Training for rural-based medicines, and now we're getting people from all over wanting to come to learn. But that allows us to grow it into a scalable operation that allows our own young people to get involved in that. So it's a piece of business that's growing there for creating opportunities in, you know, nursing, and for doctors. So they're now teaching that skill at West Cumberland Hospital, and that's what allows us to attract, if you like, the right quality of doctors and nurses here, but also allows us to train our young people alongside, actually, what I can say is quite a few international students that are coming in there. So many that it's now taken over a hall to residence to Summer Grove, which, you know, was used basically for contractors and that is now like a halls of residence for people wanting to work in that industry. So we are continually trying to open the opportunities.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What are the priorities for each council, and are they the same or different? Will you be working with Westmoreland? How does the structure work?
Yeah, so the structure, as I say, it's really strange because what we had to start with was 7 councils. So in a way, we had to desegregate them. So we had to split 7 councils and create 2. A lot of those services that were carried out across Cumberland and Westmoreland are what are known now as hosted services. So very difficult to split. Economies of scale didn't require them to be split. So what happens is we work really closely. There'll be a joint committee that will actually sit with 6 councillors from Cumberland and 6 from Westmoreland, working on those joint services. So thinking things like social care and things like that. That probably you'll not see a lot of change, but that will be hosted in one of the 2 councils because somebody has to be the employer. So if a service is hosted in Westmoreland, so Westmoreland hosts, say, the service, you know, social care, Cumberland will pay its contribution to Westmoreland to pay that service. So it'll still be a Cumbria-wide service, and that'll still be delivered pretty much as it is now. There will be savings that will allow us to expand it. So those savings will be reinvested back into the way it's managed, because you've not got 2 sets of management. But it will be a service that's Cumbria-wide, but actually be hosted in one community. And there are a number of services that we've done that with that made no sense to split. Fire and rescue wasn't split, and that's now gone under the Police and Crime Commissioner. And that will stay as, if you like, Cumbria Fire Service will remain as Cumbria Fire Service. It won't be a Cumberland and a Westmoreland. It'll be Cumbria, but that'll sit under the Police and Crime Commissioner now, instead of the local authority control. So quite a number of hosted services, but some services we decide that we can run better, like, you know, things like refuse and highways that are easily dividable. Those now will be operated from within their Cumberland things, and they'll still be badged as, if you're doing social care in Cumberland, you'll be Cumberland badge, you know, but you'll be hosted by Westmoreland. Complicated, but it's better than it was when it was 7 councils, that it's now just 2 councils. And I mean, that's where the savings come in. We had 7 chief executives, we now have 2. So, you know, and I think a lot of people were worried about employment, but I think what we've had to do, we've had to employ more people on the ground, and it was probably senior management where the structural savings came in place.
That's a question that I wanted to ask, actually. So the people, obviously there has been some job losses. Has there been any support to those people to help them find alternative employment?
Yeah, so there's been no compulsory redundancies, if you like. Most people have a lot of people chose to leave the organisation, and I think a lot of people chose to retire. I think some people looked at it as their opportunity to retire. A lot of people looked at the opportunities to develop, but there's been no compulsory redundancies in that space. But as people probably knew their job was disappearing, have moved on. A lot of people took the opportunity to move on. So I think it's happened quite amicably, you know. There were interviews for jobs, but people in chief exec roles very often just move on to another authority or to a different line of business, you know. So yeah, there's been some losses, but those losses have mainly come, you know, at very senior level. We still need all the people to do the jobs that are doing, you know, the people that are delivering the services on the ground. We are still advertising for people. We have vacancies in the organisation, not, you know, we're not getting rid of people. We've got vacancies, and I think that's good. I think, you know, that's good that there's vacancies, because those are the jobs and roles that can be filled. And the councils employ such a wide range, but you know, as people looking at careers, people probably don't naturally think of their local authority, but actually you can go into highways, but you may end your career in accounts or something. It doesn't, you know, there's a lot of opportunities within a local council to move around within an organisation that's delivering lots of skills. You may start as a council apprentice in one area. That doesn't restrict you to staying within, you know, highways for your entire career. There's plenty of opportunity to move across into other authorities. My dog must have found the postman.
Oh, don't worry, it's the same in our house normally. So the chat has gone a little bit quiet, but I do have some of my own questions that I would quite like to ask. So in the meantime, if I ask these, then please continue to use the chat or raise your hand and we can ask those. So one of my questions is, how come there's no elected mayors for Cumberland now? Whose decision was that to get rid of? Obviously, we had one in Copeland previously.
Yeah, so one of the phases in local government review is when we did the change, there is still the opportunity to have a mayor. So these are called devolution deals, and the government runs various phases of devolution deals, and that bit is about how much money can be invested in an area. The ethos some of us have is we would like to see a directly elected mayor. You look at some of the great successes of directly elected mayors, and we can look at Ben Houchin, Conservative, out there in, you know, over on the northeast, done fantastic things, bought an airport, turned it from a failing airport to a success, done some fantastic things, not being political. You can look at what Andy Burnham's done for Labour. He took over Manchester and all those authorities. It's allowed real investment because there's one accountable person. So the accountability, government's happy to invest where it can see real accountability. What it doesn't like is throwing money at small councils where it's probably not used as efficiently. So the opportunity for Cumbria and Westmoreland, what it says is that government, it needs both those authorities to want to go for a directly elected mayor. Currently, neither of those authorities at this stage have an appetite for that, which is disappointing. At the same stage we went through our local government review, so did North Yorkshire and York City. They decided to go with a directly elected mayor and take a devolution deal from government, which will bring a figure around £800 million worth of investment into that area. Now, not being political, if we signed a joint agreement with the two councils to work more closely together, the figure of investment will be around £500 to £600 million worth of investment that will come this way. There's money coming this way, but if we went for a directly elected mayor, and these aren't my figures, these were done by KMPG, a recognised finance institution, they reckon to have a directly elected mayor would raise that to about 800 million. So the more money comes, the more you've got a directly elected mayor. Whether that'll happen, I mean, politics plays its role, and we did say, you know, politics complicates local authorities, but what we've now seen is we've now got Labour running Cumberland Council, we've now got Lib Dems running Westmoreland Council. Both of those probably weren't expecting to be in the powerful roles they were, but as complicated as politics is, Partygate probably destroyed the Tories at the time of the election. So it's not a very balanced council. So therefore, we've got Labour at one side, Westmoreland at the other side. And I don't think there's a desire for them to feel they may want to lose the power. You know, and to be honest, as a politician, if somebody said to me, should we have a mayor? Yeah. And I would be quite happy if that was a Labour mayor, even though I am a Conservative, but I think a mayor is so important to an area that I don't think the politics of that mayor matters. I would campaign at every opportunity to have a mayor for Cumbria. You know, that would give us that really strong voice. It would give us that Cumbria-wide voice and give us a bigger voice in government. So I would support that regardless of the politics of the mayor.
Speaking of the role in government then, so how does the role of elected MPs fit into the new councils? Is there collaboration between the two? How does it work?
Yeah, there has to be collaboration, and that's, again, it gets complex because we've got the politics. So you've got a Labour leader and 3 Conservative MPs covering our area now. We've got 3 Conservative MPs. You know, Trudy Harrison, Mark Jenkinson, and Carlisle's, who I forget his name, but John Stevenson, sorry. And then we've got the elected leader at the council, which is a Labour one. So, but they will have to have that relationship. And regardless of the politics, they're all passionate about their area. Nobody gets into this because of them. They get into it because they're passionate about their communities. You know, because they are thankless jobs. When anybody picks the phone up to me, it's never to say what a cracking job you're doing. It's to complain about why have I got a pothole at the end of my lane, or why is my street light not working, or whatever. So, you know, and the same in a bigger scale for MPs, you know. So they've got to believe passionately in it. So, yeah, they will work together because, you know, you've got a Conservative government at the moment, so that's where the negotiation is. But at those levels, negotiations still happen. There isn't a brick wall that says, sorry, you're the wrong politics, so we're not talking to you. It's still about, you know, having those conversations, and MPs are the route into government. And although councils have routes into government, it's when those routes fail that you go to your MP to open the doors. As I talked about with the PFI, Trudy Harrison was the newly elected Conservative MP, came in with great razzmatazz because it was in the middle of it. It was a by-election. Ended up with a job in Boris Johnson's number 10. So when I needed to get into government to talk about PFI at Treasury, it was a knock on Trudy Harrison's door, who was sitting there. Can you get us these conversations? And she facilitated that. So they had got an important role to play, because Treasury probably weren't interested in talking to me, but the MP can open the door for that to happen. So we all work together because we need each other. You know, for it to work, we've all got to get on, whether we like it or not. We all have to get on.
I'm sensing that you've got to have pretty thick skin to be a councillor or an MP. So, yeah, credit to you where credit's due.
And I say, you know, when the phone rings and it goes, oh, I understand you're my councillor, they're never going to say, I'm really pleased with what you've done with this, because people don't do that, and that's human nature, I suppose. You know, it's more, you know, why is this not working? What are you going to do about that? When's this going to happen? But that's what the role is.
So the next question then is, as a resident of Allerdale, I'm aware that the government nationally capped council tax rises at 5%, but somehow people in Allerdale have got a 6.3% increase, so above the national. So just understanding why that's happened, and is there anything we're getting additionally for that?
So the answer is, are you going to get anything extra for that? No, you're not, sadly. All councils set their own council tax, and as I said, in Copeland, we'd always kept ours below 2%. We were very proud of that fact. Allerdale's had an even lower council tax. You know, they managed to set a lower council tax. Carlisle City was a bit higher. When the new authority came into place, what was in the legislation was, we recognised that we had to harmonise it. So everybody has to pay the same at some point, but everybody was starting from a different point. Allerdale's was the lowest, Carlisle City was the highest, and Copeland's was in the middle. The new council had the opportunity to phase that in over 4 years, or to take a 1 year hit. So they do it in year one, harmonise it, then from then on, the council tax rise will be the same right across all 3 patches. And that was a decision that was taken by the controlling group. And I don't think we'd have probably done anything different. In politics, if you've got to take a hit, you've got to, it's better to rip the plaster off it all at once, if you like. So, as I say, Copeland people in Copeland saw probably the government rise, because we were in the middle. Carlisle actually got a slightly less. That's not less in real terms. They still had to pay they didn't pay that extra that you paid in Allerdale. So it was quite a rough balance there, and Allerdale got the rough end of the deal. And in the future, it'll be balanced. But that harmonisation had to happen either over 4 years. I mean, probably with the cost of living crisis, when the decision was made, we probably weren't in as big a cost of living, because that was taken fairly early in the shadow authority. Probably it may have been better to have phased it over a few years, but the hits happen now, and going forward, you won't be paying any more or any less than somebody in Carlisle or Copeland. We'll all pay the same. But quite a complicated route to that, and to actually tell people they're going to pay more, and actually no, you're not going to get anything different to anywhere else. It sounds uncomfortable, but whether you'll remember that in a year's time, that's how politicians work. The next election to Cumberland's in 4 years. So
quite a sensible decision, really, when you think about it.
As a politician, take the pain in the first year, because there isn't an election this year. And that's been really frank and honest.
Yeah. There's no more questions in the chat, but I do have more up my sleeve. So just a quick round the room to see if there's anyone that wants to ask one over their microphone, or if you're happy for me to just carry on. So I don't want it to just be my question.
Still awake, because they're just dots on my screen.
Yeah. Maybe they've gone to sleep now. My next question then is to do more specifically with services. So we know in especially West Cumbria that the waiting times for like GPs and medical services, is that anything to do with the council? Is that going to be a priority if you've got any influence over that?
So the priority of the new council is health and wellbeing. It's something we're working really closely with. I think we were really lucky, because when officers decided which authorities they wanted to apply for jobs in, I think we got Colin Cox, who I think most people have probably seen on the telly very much through COVID, our Director of Health, who was Director of Health for Cumberland. He's come over to work. He's come over to work here in the Cumberland Authority, bringing that vast knowledge he's got, because it's quite complex, his health. I mean, I was always pleased. Somebody asked me a health question once before, and I said, you know what, I'd rather do nuclear any day than health. Health's way too complicated because of the different bodies and organisations that deliver it. But there was a real commitment that health and wellbeing would be is the point for everything that we do in the council. So we will be driving that forward. That's a key message for everybody that's looking at policies. The health and wellbeing has to be. They are delivered separately. We don't deliver the service. We're in a way, we can hold the service to account, but we don't deliver the service. That's done by the health authority, the health boards, and the clinicians boards, and that's what I say. It's very complicated. Is health in who delivers what parts of it. So our role is more of a scrutiny role. So we're there to hold it account, but they're really clear. And I say, the fact that Colin Cox come here, I think, was a real. The real decision he came here was whether we were putting health and wellbeing at the top of our agenda, and that's why I suspect he could have got a job in either of the councils, but he chose to come here into the Cumberland one. So I think that's a real positive. So will they shorten in the short term? Possibly not, but there's so much going on in the industry anyways, isn't there? With all the disruption with the strikes and everything, and that pushes everything back down the road. So, but we will be holding them to account, but ours is a scrutiny role of what the services they deliver. Was there more in that one or not?
No, I think it would be key to understand what the well-being side of it would be as a priority. How is that going to be delivered? Because it's okay saying it as a priority, but how would that actually get filtered down?
And you remember we're 20 days into this, 28 days since we started. So how are we going to do it? We're just setting up our first boards and panels. I think what you've got to do right at the beginning of your organisation, you have to set what your priorities are. Then every policy we develop has to be held to account to that well-being. And that's well-being right across the piece, because we've got social care. We don't actually have the health service, but we have all that leading into it. That how do we divert people away from needing, to be going into the health service? So one of the things we drove in Copeland, which I worked on, is the social prescribing. Now we developed that. We funded it externally. We got an external funder to fund it, but that's something we developed during COVID, when we realized, did we really know what health and well-being was in our communities? Because you can't fix something unless you know what it is. And we had people then, so we employ people that go out into the community, go to health and well-being events, and actually just talk to people and communities to find out what it is do they need. Is it loneliness? What is it? What's the big thing in an area? And I was actually amazed, because I thought I knew my patch quite well. And after they'd been doing some events here, which I did attend, I was surprised at some of the findings, that things needed addressed in my community that I hadn't even recognised. So I think it's finding the problem, then we can find the solutions to those problems. And I think I'd like to see what we did in Copeland with social prescribing rolled across, and I think there's an appetite for that. It's not a core funded, it's not a statutory service, so we will be looking to private enterprise and that to perhaps sponsor some of that well-being work. But I think getting people out there in the community, that's where they need to be. You can't sort these things out in an office. You need people that get out on the ground, they meet adult groups, they meet youth groups, they talk to, right across the piece, and find out what the problem, because what the problem is in my village may be very different in the next village. So it isn't a one-stop fixes all. It's about, let's have a look at what can be doing, and then you can target what's needed and what is the service that's needed there. It's maybe just improving the library service. Some of these things don't need massive things to fix them. Just creating a place where people can go. The warm hubs have been brilliant. And most of the people that went to the warm hubs wasn't because they went for a meal. They went to go and have a chat. Creating a place where, like-minded people could just call in and have a chat. That, really well. But putting your social prescriber at that event that's popping around talking to people and finding out what are the underlying problems that they're struggling with, and is it loneliness, is it isolation? It's all those things. So once we know what it is, we can put things in place to start to improve that. So it's diverting people away from the health service, if you like, early intervention.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So I'm conscious that we've made you talk for an hour, David. So I'm going to suggest that after that last point that we start asking some questions and start to get some input from the apprentices. So I'm going to suggest that actually that we use the chat or shout out, have a little think and let us know in the chat what you think is missing in your community. And then that's something that David and the rest of the councillors, employees can take forward. It's really a great opportunity for you to have a say in your local community here. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes, give David a couple of minutes to rest his voice. But yeah, please feel free to let us know what you think.
And my tea's gone cold. You don't let them go home after this event, do you?
not down to me to say. They have got some of the tutors on, so it's down to them.
I was going to say the worst place you need to be is either between some people and their lunch or between them and going home.
I don't, so let them go. I'll be in trouble. Right, we've got some starting to come in. So I don't know if you're able to see the chat messages, David, but we've got lack of public transport and 3 thumbs up. So I'm assuming that's one of the major ones that a few people think about. So I don't know if there's any plans that are changing the services with the LGR or if it's going to be the same.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I mean, I probably live in one of the worst serviced areas for public transport. So there are no buses where I come from. I live in Seascale. We have no buses come past Thornhill, so there's not been a bus service for years. We are fortunate that we have a rail station in Seascale. That does at least give us links out for people. We do receive government grant towards subsidising services, and we now need to look at what those subsidised services look like. It's about using them as well, because we got a service for 2 days a week down here as a trial, and the trouble was, and this may be about timings of when it happened, there was so few people used it that we weren't able to sustain it. So one of the things that would be a plea that if we do manage to get a service operating in your area to trial, please use it, because if you don't, I can't make a case to keep it. So it is something that we recognise. I think it's one of the things that is a deprivation trigger for rural communities, because the young people are deprived. I mean, we talked about those fantastic facilities you've got at Lilyhall. Now you'll have people that struggle to get there every day. You know, that journey isn't easy. If you come from where I come from, it's really difficult. I think you're a train to Workington and a bus from Workington, you know, up to the training centres and things like that. So we do recognise that. Low populated areas are really difficult to make an economic case for, because you can't get Stagecoach to run a service because it cannot make it pay. But we are receiving some subsidy grants, and we need to look at how we make that work. We're also talking to private sector down our way to see if I know that I've got a business down my way that's now running shuttle services for its work employees in and out of Sellafield. I'm talking to them at the moment about what the opportunities of them using some of those buses at off-peak times to offer some service in rural areas. So trying to do something that might sound a bit selfish, because that's for myself's area, but I've got an opportunity there, because there's a business that's running shuttle buses that probably are not doing very much other than parked up in the lay-by through the middle of the daytime. Is there an opportunity that we can run some bits of service? Even if we can only get people to say to the next town where there is a bus service, and then arrange for them to be able to, you know, to link with that coming back. So yeah, we will be looking how we spend that grant, and that's not been determined yet. But yeah, the driver is to get people onto public transport, but it's a bit like a chicken and egg. You have to bite the bullet to get it in the area, because you can't make any money. But what I would ask, if we do get a service working in your area, please use it, because otherwise I've no case. Putting a case for a bus for 2 people doesn't work. And literally that's what was happening down here. There was only about 2 people using it, and it's very difficult to make a case. So I do recognise it, I live with it, and I can understand, especially for young people, you know, they've not got cars and that yet, and it's the reduced cut. I'll sell that one. It was a trial. It has been extended so that keeping the fares down. I do believe that Stagecoach and the companies have fed back that seems to have been successful in the fact that it's increased the usage. So it's certainly remaining for the time being. I couldn't put my hand on my heart and say it's here forever, but it's certainly there at the moment. And I think more people that use the bus recognises that it can keep the cost of fares down if it's got more people on its buses. So it's again that same problem. If you could fill a bus, probably everybody can pay half the amount to travel on it. So it's about using that, but it's here to stay at the moment, and it has appeared to be quite successful. I didn't get the next one.
Thank you. No, it's fine. I'll read that one out. So we've got a question that's come back in saying, is the council supportive of the new stadium for Workington Reds, and when will the work commence?
My understanding, I'm not as close to this one. Obviously, not been an Allerdale councillor. My understanding that it went through as fully supported and funded. So what happened when Allerdale ceased to exist and things went into the new Cumberland Authority? Anything that those statutory councils had agreed to becomes policy of Cumberland. So at this stage, it is going to happen. I don't have a date for starting because I say, sadly, I'm not that close to it, but I'm sure, if I know who your local council is, I can get them to contact you and update you. But it is still on the cards. It's still there. Cumberland has not taken a decision not to do that. So it still remains that it's funded, and as far as I'm aware, it's going to happen. The date for it happening, I don't know.
So just following on from that, I don't know if we probably do have some learners from Maryport, but obviously this week, I don't know if you'll know the answer, but this week they've got the news that the Wave Centre is not going to go ahead as a swimming pool, which is disappointing for the area because of rising costs. So that's obviously the decision now been made by Cumberland. So I don't know if you can shed any light on that.
So that's not so it is a decision taken by the council. It's been taken by the council's executive. So the controlling body, it's never come to the full councils. I've had no input whatsoever into that. So the way local authority works is you've got councillors, but the power lies within the executive, which is the 10 senior people. I mean, I've had a taste of that. I did that in Copeland when I was there. I was an executive member, but here now I'm just a councillor, if you like, what's known as a backbencher. That's been taken by the executive. Now, the money was coming through the Better High Streets Fund, and there's quite a number of those across Cumberland, but Allerdale was required to put money into there and had committed to do so. The cases for swimming pools is the absolute rising costs of heating them. And I mean, they've taken the decision, I don't know whether rightly or wrongly, because I've not scrutinised the figures yet, but they've now taken the decision that it's the running costs that they wouldn't pick up. It's not the cost of building it. So, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed because we have a high street bid in Millham, and one of those is a swimming pool. Now, I'm just hoping the new Cumberland isn't looking at that one at the moment, but they will all suffer. So what happened is all the projects that each council had all went into the new council on the 1st of April. In the structural change order, they transferred. But Cumberland does have the right now to decide whether to go ahead or not. And I don't think it's on capital costing, it's on running costs. So I understand that'll be really disappointing to Maryport. And, I'm watching closely after that happened to see if Millham one rises, because they're all funded through town fund deals or high street bids, but they require the council to continue to support them after, and we know all swimming pools are losing money, sadly. It's the energy cost, and even looking at putting a brand new one in with heat source pumps and all that, you've got to run them as a loss leader. So unless you have we tried to put a gymnasium and things next to the one. We did that in West Cumberland. We did that with the Copeland Centre. When it was failing and we didn't know how to support it, we invested and put a gym on the end, and the gym's making a profit, if you like, to subsidise the other. So I don't know and I really don't know what the business case for the Wave was. But yeah, it's sad though.
Thank you, and thank you for your honesty as well. The next question that's coming does, I assume, link. So it's what's the council doing to tidy up rundown town centres and the lack of shops? Now, I know, for example, Allerdale had a lot to do with the future high street works. Yeah. So I assume, but yeah, I don't know if you can provide any more information on what they're doing to tidy up town centres.
So town centres, and I think this is a really difficult one because I think each town has to look at what are its strengths and weaknesses, because high streets, and this is the way of the world, high streets are dying because the shops that were the lifeblood of them aren't surviving anymore. They're moving online. Their customers are moving online. You know, it's why the banks are disappearing. It's why the shops. I mean, you go into Carlisle and you see massive stores like Debenham standing shut, but it's because their cost model is not town centres. So I think every town centre needs to kind of invent itself in what else does it have. So I've not been close to the Allerdale one. So when we're looking at Whitehaven, we're looking at a mix of new types of shops, more niche shops, a little bit of, you know, a bit more of the coffee culture, people sitting out, but also putting above those maybe sort of one bedroomed flats and accommodation. So making them sort of town centres accommodation to try and bring people back into the high street, because I think we're never going to fill them with shops. We've had all these house fund initiatives. We've had experts that have visited towns up and down the country, and you can't stop the rise that people are buying online. And it's the way we're all doing it. I look at the complaints when there's a bank branch closes, but then they'll show you the numbers. We all bank on an app on our phone, don't we? You know, we don't go to a branch anymore. So, and I think the sad losers in this are the elderly and least mobile that, you know, can't either do the internet or, you know, travel into these places. So I think they're most effective, but I think the answers lie with each individual community and what is its strengths. You know, you look at Whitehaven, its strengths around its harbour and its Georgian history. You know, you've got to look at that. What is working? I think Working has retained more shops probably than Whitehaven's been able to, but it's on footfall. And we've got high street funds bids. So we've got one for Millam and Cleatamore in our area, and know that there was two in Allerdale as well. So there is some money there, but you've got to diversify. One of the properties in Whitehaven we're looking at changing it into a gaming centre. You know, but where people can go in and not just, I'm not talking about playing games, I'm talking about learning how to write games and do that type of work. The Whittle shop, you know, it was a furniture shop. It's never going to be a furniture shop in the high street anymore. You know, so how do you repurpose that? And, you know, that's what we're looking at, with some accommodation above it, but a gaming centre in the bottom where people can go and pick up those things that they know and understand. And how do you develop what you'd call, I don't know if you call it sport gaming, but how do you develop that into a career?
And there's a lot going on in Whitehaven as well. It seems quite exciting over there. I've seen this week that the exhibitions have just opened, the photo exhibition things and the signs at the harbour. So
yeah, and I think sometimes when the council bought up some of the shops that's empty, you know, to try and repurpose those into opportunities for people starting businesses, so that we could subsidise, you know, some entrepreneur wanting to set up a business, give them that opportunity, give them some space. One of the shops, we've got like 3 units in there where if you want to come along and, you know, you've got a business idea and you want to just grow it maybe from doing it in your front room or whatever, we can give them that 3 or 4 months in there to see if there's scope for them to grow it into a business. So I think we can do that things, but I think those are niche businesses. You know, the days of the Debenhams and them have sadly gone.
But it's opening up a whole other industry for young people as well in Cumbria.
Yeah.
Startup businesses.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in people being innovative and driving their own business ideas and ambitions. And I think there's a lot of help and support now to do that. You know, there's a lot of support for people that want to take that. You know, when I was going to become self-employed, it was told that that wasn't a job. Well, at least you can control your own destiny. You don't have a boss every day telling you what to do, and you make your own failings.
The pandemic, I think, has changed the way we work as well, hasn't it? So gone are the 9 to 5 standard days, and quite rightly, young people are demanding more from employers. So yeah, the world is the oyster, really, I guess, and there is a lot out there in Cumbria.
Yeah, well, I think most of the world, a lot of them go to work 3 days a week and work from home 2 days a week. If you know, I can tell that by looking at what go in and out of Sellafield. Monday to Fridays are very quiet. Monday and Friday are very quiet now. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are busy with people travelling into work. So yeah, and we're doing this on Zoom, aren't we? Who'd have thought of that?
I know how many people you can get in a room at one time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd willingly come to Lilial. Don't get me wrong. I don't mind. I don't mind travelling. I do like to be face to face. But I have carried out meetings. I've carried out international meetings on Zoom that would have meant me travelling. And to be quite honest, I'm quite happy doing them from home.
Yeah.
Foreign travel might sound exciting, but it isn't if you're going to a conference or something, because all you do is live out of a suitcase in a hotel room, isn't it?
Yeah. So are there any other questions for David, or David, do you have any other questions for our apprentices?
No, I just hope they've found it interesting enough. I know when you have a subject that you're passionate about yourself, it doesn't mean to say that it raises that same passion with everybody else. I hope it's made it an interesting morning and has given some food for thought. And
Yes.
I just take the opportunity to wish them all well, whatever their careers and futures take them, and our paths may cross again sometime.
Yes, and we really do thank you for your time. It is much appreciated. So thank you for doing that. So David, feel free to stick around. I'm just going to do a couple of final things with the apprentices. It's up to you. But yes, thank you so much. And I've personally found it very useful. And my key takeaway is that if there's something not right in your community, please speak up, because it's us that's, well, I say us, I'm a little bit older than most of you, but it's us that's going to be living with these decisions that are made now. So it's a really great opportunity for you to input.
And if they just go to the Cumberland website, it'll tell them exactly who their councillor is and how to contact them. There's an email and a mobile number for every councillor on there. So, we're not allowed to hide behind, we don't want to post our details out there. We've got to be upfront and available. So, and I would encourage people, if you think you've got a problem, it's a pothole or whatever, just get onto your local councillor. It's why we signed up to the job.
And on heart, I don't think I know who my local councillor is. So maybe my homework is to go and find out who they are and more about them.
Well, yeah, if you just go to the website and scroll down to where it says councillors and click on it, they all come up with their pictures. And if you click on that, it then gives you all the details.
That's great. So, thank you.
No hiding place.
So yeah, thanks once again.